One of the things that I've spent very little time, unfortunately, discussing in the 12 books that I've written over the last 20 years is the concept of empathy. And I mean empathy in the context of, being able to feel what someone else feels. And as a way to sort of walk in their shoes, as it's been said over the years. And it's interesting, I feel like, because as I've gotten older, my views of empathy empathy have changed drastically. Living in the United States, growing up in the United States, it's, I think for a lot of us, it's go, 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 go. We're known around the world as the success obsessed country. And I think that's probably a fair criticism, and it usually is a criticism. Now, in our defense, and I've said this all over the world in speeches and in the press, frankly, on TV and radio and the rest, that we're also responsible for many and most of the greatest innovations of the last 200 years. So our success obsession has resulted in quite a bit of innovation and world-changing kinds of technology and other innovations and inventions. So there is an upside to chasing success. And so I think those of us that grab onto this concept, and I'm one of these people that did this early, was, how can you really go out there and stake your claim and become a millionaire and be independent and do what you want and live, big and live large and all those things and live your best life. I bought into it full stop. No question about it. And I frankly don't regret it. I chased like a lot of people, had great opportunities, had a lot of luck involved, had a lot of people be very nice to me and help me along the way. And I was a millionaire at a very early age. And that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's great. The one thing I'm coming up on 60 years old now and reflecting back on all these years of chasing world-class success and success in general, the one thing that I would change, I don't know if it's a regret, but the one thing I would change, I'd ask you to consider, no matter what your age may be at this time, is the concept of embracing the plight of people that don't have the advantages that you have. Those advantages obviously take many forms. They could be intellect, they could be education, they could be contacts, they could be connections, they could be almost anything. But the bottom line is life is not fair. All things are not equal. All people are not equal in terms of their talent and their ability and their ambition and all these things. So while it's great that the ambitious people in first world countries can go out and stake their claim and become financially independent and live these lives that are broadcast all over and posted all over social media every day, and I've been part of that, frankly. I mean, there's no way I can really deny that. I've said things on television. I've been on over 1,000 TV interviews for my books over the years, and I've said some things on television that were clearly rooted in the idea that, without saying it, that life is a level playing field, and that is just not true. And what I wish I would have said more often in the press, especially on television, where I reached millions of people over the years, I wish I would have clearly expressed that, because I don't think I ever denied it. I just never really pushed it, because it's just, success gets in your blood, especially when you chase it for a long time or a relatively long period of time in the first world, and everything's about success, and here's how you prove yourself, and here's how you tell the world you're somebody, and all those things that, quite frankly, are absolute nonsense. I mean, now that I'm almost 60 years old, I look back at some of the things I used to say and believe more than anything else, and it's just nonsense. Money doesn't make you somebody. Success doesn't make you somebody. Your car, your clothes, your shoes, your house, whatever. It's ridiculous as a premise to say your success makes you somebody. You were born somebody. You don't have to prove anything to anybody that you're more than them, or you're more than you need to be. You do what you want to do. Enjoy your life. Chase success if it pleases you. It makes you feel fulfilled and happy. But for God's sakes, don't ever believe it makes you important. It's ridiculous. And I'm laughing at myself. So if you believe this and you think I'm laughing at you, I'm not. I'm laughing at me because I believed it. And it's really stupid. And I feel stupid even saying that because it's a ridiculous premise. That's not true. And so just going back to empathy, it's like Jamie Dimon said. They were asking Jamie Dimon recently, of course, the chairman of J.P. Morgan Chase, multi-billionaire, very successful guy, one of the most successful people in the world, one of the richest people in the world. And they asked him about his political affiliation. And he said, well, let me put it to you this way. In my head, I'm a Republican. But in my heart, I'm a Democrat. And politics aside, the concept is simple, right? Republicans tend to be more toward pull yourself out by your bootstraps, small government, more individual freedom. They want to keep their guns and they want their autonomy, and there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, I've been of that mindset for most of my life, frankly, because just because it seemed to embrace the rugged individualist of the pioneers of America and all these things that we read about in books. And I think there's some real truth to it, frankly. I think there really is truth to that. But for those 99% of the population, even in first world countries like the United States and Canada and Australia and Europe and places where most Western Europe where people are free to go out and chase their dreams. What a beautiful thing. Most of the world doesn't have that opportunity. Well, we won the genetic lottery geographic lottery, where we were born in the right place at the right time, and we have these great opportunities, so we go chase them. But I think we owe it to ourselves and the other 99% of the people that don't get to either achieve their dreams or even have a chance to achieve their dreams, to be empathetic, to say, look, life is not fair. Yes, I've achieved something, whatever that might be for every individual person. It doesn't make me any better, smarter, faster, more important, or anything else. And I think that when we have empathy for other people that are struggling, which most people are, even in the first world, most people struggle their entire lives, especially when it comes to money. They struggle for whatever reason. And to not have a serious amount of empathy for that struggle, that stress, the single mother raising, 3 kids, working 3 jobs, what chance does she really have of ever breaking out of that situation financially? Very little. The odds are slim to none. Maybe she gets lucky, and I hope she does. But odds are she won't. Odds are she will struggle until she draws her last breath, and most people do. So my point of this is not to beat up on people who are successful and chase success, because all my books, all the programs, all the speeches I've delivered, the thousands of speeches and training seminars I've delivered all over the world for the last 25 years for some of the biggest companies in the world, focused on pushing to increase sales and market share, doing turnarounds with huge companies where they would, earn hundreds of millions of dollars, in some cases more money, because we were there for a year, 18 months, or whatever it might have been. And it's always been about success. So I'm not putting that down, because I've built my entire, career on that premise. But that said, as Jamie Dimon alluded to, I think we have to increase, as we mature psychologically, emotionally, we should be increasing our level of empathy for people that struggle, because that's almost everyone. And I know if you inhabit the circles of the wealthy, the circles of the very, very successful, and you live in that bubble, again, I've done the same thing, you start to see the world through sort of a myopic perspective, where you can only see it one way. And the successful run the world, and they own the world, and they do own the world, and they do run the world for sure, good or bad. If you're not in that group, well, then you're less than the powerful, successful people. That is just a formula for psychological, emotional failure. And I had to embrace it. When I was on Fox Business Network, and I did a fair amount of times, I was a regular guest on Varney and Company on Fox Business. I said some things on there that were not overly, I don't think I pushed it over a limit, but I did allude to the idea, especially when Obama was president, that hey, when he said, you didn't build that and all those things, and the Republicans went nuts. I kind of contributed to that and said, you know what, he's wrong. We did build that. Well, what he was actually alluding to was the idea that you didn't build it alone. You had mentors, you had help, you had education, you had all these things. You know what? He was absolutely right. I don't care if you liked him as a president or not. He was right about that. That's objective reality. That's not fantasy. And I never agreed with it on television. I said that, and I wrote articles about it and did tons of interviews, hundreds of interviews about that on the radio. And I feel ashamed that I did it, honestly, because I was wrong. And because it shows a lack of empathy for most people that struggle. And most people that struggle are not lazy. That's a fantasy. Most people that struggle are hardworking people. They want to get ahead. They just don't have the opportunities that other people have, and it's not fair. And I'm not saying I don't know how to make it fair. That's not my point. My point is we need to empathize with those people and try to feel what they feel and do what we can do to help them succeed, to help them be happier, to help them reduce their level of stress, because we had a leg up that they didn't have, whether we deserved that leg up or not. And I fit right squarely into that category, and that's why I wanted to bring this up. So to wrap this up, not to go too far with this, but just I would ask you to ask yourself the question I've been asking myself for the last couple of years, especially after I got COVID for 5 weeks and I didn't know if I was going to come out of it. I started really doing some soul searching while I was sweating and losing weight laying in bed for 5 weeks, thinking I might not make it. And that's, have I been empathetic? Excuse me. Have I been empathetic enough towards others who are struggling? Or did I take this callous kind of approach to say, well, if you're struggling, it's your fault. If you're struggling, you're lazy. If you're struggling, there's some kind of reason that it's your fault. It's not usually the case. Once in a while, obviously. There's always outliers in statistics, always. But most of the time, it's not people's fault. It's just the situation they're in. Life is not fair. There's no data, evidence, proof to prove at any level whatsoever that life is fair. It's just nonsense. It's just not. Excuse me. Some people have advantages other people don't. So we've got to empathize. So on a scale of 1 to 7, 7 being your most empathetic toward those who are struggling more than you are in some way, shape, or form, and 1 being, you're not empathetic at all. Where do you fall in that scale? And if it's not a 7, and I'm not at a 7 yet, I'm working on it. I want to be, but I'm just not. For some other reason, it's hard to shed years and years of mindset. Where do you fall in that scale? It's really an important view, especially as you mature in life and you get older and you realize some of the people you overlooked, you probably shouldn't have. And some of the people you thought, hey, why don't they just suck it up and move on? You look back and think, well, maybe I could have lent a hand. Maybe I could have talked to him. Maybe I could have looked at things a little bit differently than I did. It's something to think about. I think if more of us were more empathetic, especially those of us who've been blessed enough, fortunate enough, whatever you want to call it, lucky enough to succeed at a higher level than most people, I think we owe it to ourselves and to the world to be more empathetic. I think we'll be happier. I feel more fulfilled the more empathy I put into my mind and I exhibit in the world. I feel happier, more fulfilled because I think it's right. I don't know what you think about that. I just think it's the right thing to do. Because I'll tell you what, if I didn't have the advantages I've had over the years and all the help and the education and all those other things, I sure would hope that people that had advantages I didn't have would be empathetic toward me and maybe try to lend me a hand if they could, or at least, someone to talk to. It's something to consider, again, I think just as you mature on your journey. Something to think about. Thanks for listening.